So we're recording. Hello, people. Today we have Adam Kokesh. Hello, Adam. Thank you very much for coming.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So, people, I'm so proud to say that today we have Adam Kokesh. He is a presidential candidate for the Libertarian Front in the United States and came to talk to us about his book, his career, and much more in politics. So, Adam, I would like you to tell us how did everything start on the political career?
Well, I have to kind of go back pre-political to explain how I got to this level of involvement. But my mom's actually Canadian, or formerly Canadian. She's better now. She got her U.S. citizenship. No, I'm half Canadian, half Jewish. Don't tell anybody. But no, my mom was born in Baie-D'Urfé near Montreal, and I've got to spend a lot of time there with my grandma before she passed. And my father, she's vaguely liberal, and my dad was, he's from Sundance, Wyoming. Grew up on a cattle ranch, and he was vaguely conservative, but they were both very much anti-authoritarian, and I got a very strong disdain for authority, for the establishment, a very deeply imbued tendency to question authority, to challenge authority, to do the right thing regardless of whether it was the legal thing. And I I really think that it's important, and this is jumping ahead a little bit, but for libertarianism to be communicated as an ethical philosophy, not as a political orientation, because it's not. It's I own myself, you own yourself. That's why the non-aggression principle is the foundation of ethics. Don't hit, don't steal, don't kill, regardless of whether you're wearing a badge or a fancy hat or whatever authority symbols you have behind you. It doesn't excuse unethical behavior. But I thought of myself as kind of libertarian growing up. In high school, at some point, they said, "All right, do you want to be a Republican or a Democrat?" And I was like, "Wait a second, this is America. I'm supposed to have a choice. I don't have to be lame like those guys, do I?" And they're like, "Well, you can be a libertarian. You can be left alone." And I was like, "All right, I'm a punk kid. Leave me alone. No big deal." But I was presented libertarianism as socially liberal, fiscally conservative in the realm of politics, and that didn't stop me from joining the Marine Corps. And that's why I think if I had gotten the message of freedom, of libertarianism as an ethical message, I would not have volunteered to kill for politicians, because that's what you're doing when you join the U.S. military, or at least to help and be part of that process of killing for politicians. And I went reserve so I could go to college. While I was in college, I volunteered to go to Iraq. I was in Fallujah in 2004. And again, if I had known better, if I had gotten libertarianism as an ethical message, I would not have done that. I would not have been a willing party to a war crime. Of course, I was lied to. That doesn't excuse it. I think what I did was dangerously naive. And I'm not even, especially enlightened or of any particular mindset, other than just sort of intellectual tenacity and willingness to do the right thing and to challenge my beliefs. So I still believed in the mainstream American militarism until I volunteered to go back to Iraq in 2006, and I got in trouble for bringing a pistol back from my tour before. And I got a medal for my tour. I got a Navy Achievement Medal. And the day after they pinned that on me, I got busted from sergeant to corporal. And it was getting out of the military pissed off. I was disgruntled. I had just spent a year as a sergeant who spoke Arabic and had great combat experience and commendations and everything. And instead of going to Iraq again, I sat and managed a barracks at Camp Pendleton. And like I was pissed off. that was how I was doing my last time in the Marines. And I was like, you know what, after this, I'm out of here. I don't want to be a part of it anymore. And it was because, and it was right before I got out, I got busted from sergeant to corporal. I was disgruntled, and that's what made me ready to really question things. And my first foray into full-time activism was Iraq Veterans Against the War. That was me in a situation where, hey, you know how there are people dying over there? Well, if enough Americans knew my story and what I experienced over there, policy would change, less people would die. Like that's you know, a big weight and a big motivator. And what I realized while I was in Iraq Veterans Against the War was that it wasn't enough to be against this war, or even to be against American wars or war in general, or even militarism. And militarism is the thing that a lot of people miss when it comes to really getting to the root of the problem. Militarism, it is a perversion of the warrior class. It is a perversion of everything that it's supposed to mean to be American. The founders of this country were against what they called a standing army. And if you want to get into that, I will rant for hours just about the evils of militarism and how war is a racket. But for me, I have to be very humble in the sense that I didn't come to this message because I'm so smart and I just wanted to figure stuff out and I wanted to be right about everything and then I was a libertarian. No, it was like I had to experience the greatest evils that government is capable of firsthand. I had to see war and death and the destruction of that. I had to see the perversion of my own soul, of my own desire to be a good person, to want to be ethical, to even to be willing as a warrior to put my life on the line for what I believed in, to protect people, because that's what I naively thought we were doing. And it was in that process, while I was active with Iraq Veterans Against the War, starting, like I got out November 30, 2006, and moved to DC for school. And then I just fell into full-time activism with Iraq Veterans Against the War. And we won the conversation. You know, we won the debate about Iraq. Nobody thinks invading Iraq was a great idea, and we need to finish the job and do it right. No, you know, we won. It's you know, even Trump, as much as he has kept it going, you know, the American military and diplomatic presence in Iraq and Afghanistan, throughout the Middle East, at least he had to run on a really non-interventionist foreign policy platform. But then so did George W., and we saw where that got us. You know, you have to be fundamentally against militarism to be taken seriously, at least with me, to say that you're going to, as president, be able to do anything about this. The military-industrial complex is such a stranglehold on you know, American policy. If you go in with anything other than, yeah, we're getting rid of the U.S. military, we're going to apportion it down to the states, we're going to I should say we're not getting rid of it because we're localizing it. We're making it stronger. We're making it better. We're making America safer as a result with a decentralized militia-based defense. So anyway, to finish answering your question, then I ran for Congress in New Mexico, couldn't shut up when I was done, and got a radio show turned into a TV show, and then, you know, running Adam versus the Man online, YouTube, and podcasting mostly. And at some point, when you take the time to understand freedom, to understand libertarianism, to understand the message of ethics behind it, you cannot help but see the scale of evil and injustice in the world done in the name of government. And I can't be the guy who just drives past a car accident when I could get out and help. And that's how I feel about it at this point. And, you know, if you're a doctor, you know, and taking the time to understand ethics, and as it relates to government, what you're doing with this show, taking the time to care about these things enough to educate yourself, that makes you a doctor in this analogy. And if you're a doctor and you drive by, a car accident, you see that there's someone who's bleeding out on the sidewalk and you could go stop them to save that life, you got
Yeah,
to do it.
I think for doctors, it's funny. I cannot talk. I don't like the communistic talk for all the doctors. So I'm not gonna say like, yes, doctor, I'm gonna tell you that, yeah, we all do it. But I believe it is something that in our training that it makes almost inevitable. Like even when I was early here in Canada, could not speak properly the language. I've seen accidents like stop the car, and I would try go there, try to talk and try to help until the firefighters would come, or some help. So I think it's inevitable. Or like coming out of the shift to go to a party, go to the party, there's a fight, and I'm like there already seeing someone
Yeah.
like, and then my husband's like, what are you doing? It's like, whoa, I'm doing my job, I guess.
Yeah.
It's natural. So I love the conversation about how you became, like all involved, but also how you actually were drawn first by like the natural methods the government has to bring people to being tools of the oppression of the government. I've
Mm-hmm.
listened to your book once again this morning. I told you already for 3 hours, and then it always comes back to the idea that I always had, and I think it's not common. People think that it's okay, the oppression we suffer from the government. They think it's for a greater good, and I think it is an important talk to say how no, we don't need this big government to rule out our lives or to take care of
Yeah.
our decisions, our education and safety, mainly when most of the governments are not actually doing that well. So why we would keep growing and making more of it? It feels counterintuitive.
Well, so you're suggesting that the government has gotten worse over time, right?
I think the government has a purpose. I think it's important to talk when you talk about freedom for people that are sometimes in the left and right, like you said, Republican and Democrats, always like to strawman libertarians as the anarchists, that the ones that don't believe in government, that they want the chaos, that, oh, if you don't have the government to protect you, they scare,
Right.
they use this scary narrative to like, if you don't have government, people will just kill each other on the streets and you have nobody to protect you,
Yeah.
this
Well,
state
so,
of
so
fear.
yeah. No, I'm with you there. I just would make. I was making the distinction about things. Things are actually getting better. Two steps forward, one step backwards, and I think we're at the end of a major step backwards of modern, violent, bureaucratic governments based around militaries and central banks. But if you consider that the true measure of evil of government is not its size, but how much it violently takes us away from our state of natural harmony. You know, I would rather live under a really big government that's totally peaceful than a tiny government that murders a million random people every day, right? Like, duh. So that's an important distinction. And what I see is that when you understand that we're living in the most peaceful times in human history, and that we're following a decline from the work of Professor Steven Pinker at Harvard. Great TED Talk on this book, a great book, Better Angels of Our Nature, shows that violence is on the decline over human history. And it's just that we make this exception for government now. And the ideal of, some people would call it, being an anarchist based on some analyses, but it's a stupid, divisive word to begin with, because as libertarians, we're all saying, let's embrace ethics. We don't really care what comes out of that. Like, do we call it government or not? Or is it meeting this function or that function? We really don't care. What it all comes down to is it ethical? Is it voluntary? Does it respect the individual self-ownership? Does it endorse coercive relationships, or does it say that all Relationships must be engaged in by choice of everybody involved, by consent. It's do we give people consent or the option to deny consent in social systems? That's really all it is. And that, when you get down to that, that unites people. And this is why seeing the message presented as socially liberal, fiscally conservative is not just not the message, let alone a watered down version, but it's still endorsing the idea of coercion. It's still endorsing if you don't stick to principle. And what I found is that when you do that, when you really stand for what you believe in, you don't compromise, you don't pander, and you don't play the political game, you inspire more people.
That's right. But I think in your book, you talk about all the time about the principles. And I think you bring these principles like just the not hitting, the non-violent, no force, and no stealing, like the property, all based on the property and the ownership of the individual. And you bring back the idea, what I think more of individualism and objectivism in philosophy that we're lacking. I think that is what you're lacking. When you actually said like, oh, you naively entered this system, it is because we are lacking philosophy and the idea of the individual, the value. And I think I only faced the idea of taxation is theft when I start making money, and I was like, wait a minute, why do they have the right to take part of my work? This is like what I made in a month is like me going to the shift and like 24-hour shifts, and then they go there and take like 27.5 in Brazil. It's almost 30% just on the income. So accumulated, we're paying close between 50 to 60% taxation. And I was like, okay, but when even on the trades, like when you buy something in Brazil, they now have 100% importation taxes. So if you buy something and receive on the post office, they will charge you 100% of the value of your package. And I was like, okay, so why did the government have any right to take money out of this transaction? Like they did not put any effort into this. I was the one that bought from someone outside, and now they come and claim they have the right to take the same value out of me. For what? For me to have the right to have it, and that was just so like I went through that much later and also got involved into politics more because of that. But I actually think it is the lack of philosophy and education. And talk about this in early ages, much early, and before that we have to experience.
And I hear a lot of libertarians, and I even occasionally complain that they don't teach civics anymore. Like they don't teach civics classes or social studies that are just the basic, elementary American education for what is a government, how does your government. Well, they don't tell you what is a government, because then you would realize it's a racket. They don't ever define the word itself, but they tell you about the three branches and just basically like how voting works, stuff like that. They don't even teach you that anymore. They don't teach basic personal finance either, but that's almost like secondary. They don't teach ethics. You just teach ethics.
We don't need like so many long laws and these huge constitutions if you would just follow the basic principles and apply them over and over in every situation. It's just because I think people kind of like are kind of lazy and want this patriarchal government that takes care of their problems instead of then have to go through every situation and have to figure out. So they, like uh, we have been indoctrinated in this situation of like, oh, we have this recipe that in this situation you apply this. and people got used to and lazy, and it's like, oh, that's so much easier. I want the government to take care of every single problem of my life instead of have to figure it
Mm-hmm.
out and fix it by myself. And don't see, and we have talked about this before, like how almost ritualistic, like, oh, it's better to almost like this, I'll pray and God takes care of this, so I'll have the government that I pay some
Yep.
taxes and they take
Yep.
care of the problems and I don't need to deal with it, so my neighbor doesn't need to come and ask me to help with something, they can use the
Yeah.
government, you know, like, but
It makes
no,
people
but that is
isolated.
not the best way, because they don't see that the overpower over everybody, it changes every election in the
Yes.
way that we made, and the system can be dominated by people that we know take advantage of it. So it is huge. The discussion, for example, in Brazil, where we had like uh 30 ministries, and I was like, do we have so many? It's like, it's not just like health, education, and safety, or some type of security pause, like, retirement, like
Mhm.
4 5, okay, 30, why? It's just like we're making a big closet of politicians, and then they keep putting them in there and paying more and getting nothing out of it.
Well, they learned from the American government, I'm sure.
Yeah, strong effects of straight America, United States to Brazil. Dictatorship was pretty much orchestrated and dominated by United States, and it's still nowadays, as it's just because I don't want to claim United States to actually influencing it, uh, specifically, but also because Brazilians look up to United States, and it's natural. It's more successful, so we should
Right.
copy. But also, we should be able to analyze the principles and the results and see like what is good and what's bad, mainly when
Learn
we
from
talk
our
about
mistakes.
politics. So it's just saying Obamacare is trap. Don't do it. we have like the SUS, that is the health, public health, not saying that is the worst, is still better than the Canadian health system.
Oh, really?
Yes, yes, because here in Canada it's much more socialist in the way that operates than Brazil. In Brazil, the government made a socialist health system, but it's very democratic. So people have totally freedom to go and come back from hospitals and clinics and doctors. Here in Canada, they have one doctor, your
Ah,
clinic, and that's
yeah.
it. And if
You
you're
get
not
told where to go.
satisfied, well, you're gonna
Yeah.
die with
No
it.
choice. Yeah.
And you might
Wow.
die because many. It's like it's ridiculous. I'm
And
very
the wait times, yeah.
sadly impressed by Canada health system and the doctors here in diagnose and the way that they work.
Yeah, well, I
It's
recently had to do 4 days at a hospital with someone on our crew, and I've never spent that much time in a hospital myself, and I've got relatively little experience in with healthcare because I've been very very lucky, but even with the stuff I have dealt with through the VA, Department of Veterans Affairs, it's a government run socialized healthcare system, and it really is in large part responsible for veteran suicides in America. And even just the last when I was basically with this person in the hospital for 4 days. We are capable of so much, and we have so many amazing, talented healthcare professionals. We have so much amazing technology, which even that would be way better with government and out of the way in R&D. But that even with that, the delivery of that care in the United States and the financial system around it are the direct product of socialism. To the extent that we have socialized medicine in the United States, that's where we feel it, where you can't even get good insurance, that you could have insurance and get a procedure that costs a few $100,000 and they stick you with a bill for only 50,000 and it still bankrupts you. Excuse me. From my experience in the hospital this last time, a lot of that was just delays because they just didn't have enough doctors on the floor when we needed decisions to be made for this person. That's a supply problem. That's a socialism problem. The way that that just so much stuff in the American healthcare system costs an outsized amount. That like every little medical device. I've seen this with there was a woman in a wheelchair who made a video about like every time she had to take a pee. Oh, Tiffany Adams, I think is her name. She's definitely would recommend people checking out her story if they're interested in the health freedom stuff. But like it cost her $2.50 for a little plastic straw because she needed it to pee, like as a catheter, because she was in a wheelchair. She was paralyzed, and it was like, how the heck are you? Does this system end up charging her as the end customer $2.50 for a piece of plastic that costs 2 cents to make? Like there's just so much wrong, even in the United States.
Than that, it's like it's probably going to cost $250 if it's the government buying it.
Oh yeah, right.
Okay,
Yeah.
that is another issue. So
yeah.
and I have talked to a friend of mine that is doing more studies in medicine, but more involving politics and trying to be more efficient in the service in the hospitals. And he has talked a lot about this, but apparently the problem is the management, because we have, for example, in Brazil, people that actually managing hospitals that have no idea of what they are doing, or they are not even professionals
Right.
of the area. So they go and buy things completely unproportional for the service of the hospital.
So they create inefficiencies and misallocations of resources. I have to imagine that's because you don't have a market for hospitals themselves.
In Brazil, what ended up happening is like they put all these professionals like to manage and buy expensive material. So we have like hospital is not the problem, and we have passed over the situation where we did not have we always have problems with having no cotton, for example, in small areas or far poor areas. But you go to some poor hospitals and they have the last tomography machine, and you're like, why you're not even have patients to for this?
Because some manager thought it was cool and a good way to spend money, and then there's corruption as well.
And the last government that was very corrupted tried to claim the problem was doctors. Oh no, we just don't have enough doctors, so we're going to bring doctors from Cuba. And they made other politics involving other socialist countries around Brazil to bring more doctors to Brazil, because the problem is just the doctors. And of course did not fix the problem, just caused more problems. They just transferred a lot of money to Cuba, for example, because they actually gave 10,000 reais for each doctor Cuba would send to Brazil, plus the money to relocate all these doctors and their salaries and in careers, to keep them in the areas where you're supposed to need doctors. And we don't have fixed the problem in the health there.
Before you move on, I just want to point out that the reason it's so important to apply rational economic analysis to issues around healthcare is that inefficiencies mean death, literally. What we're talking about, if even just what you were talking about there, about shuffling doctors back and forth between countries, it means that they have less time available if they're going back and forth and dealing with all this bureaucracy to actually be serving people and saving lives. There are people who die in hospitals every day all over the world who, if we had more than enough medical care for what we're capable of, they wouldn't die. Just when we're talking about, let's get market forces. And I would never say capitalism, although some people would call it that. But yes, that you have to have free trade. You have to have voluntary association in order to have an efficient allocation of resources designed to meet human needs, as opposed to serve corrupt bureaucrats and politicians and other corporate profiteers on those inefficiencies. The reason Fanny and I care about this so much is because we care about every human who is denied medical care because there's not enough. We should have more than enough to take care of everybody. And these systems slow us down from creating better systems that are going to provide more health care to more people less expensively than ever before in human history. And when you see that, it's like, yeah, you want to be, yeah, libertarian, being a libertarian is great. You're going to live better embracing freedom than the alternative. But sometimes it's a curse where you go, oh man, now it's like I see all the evil. I can't look and just see the world as it is without seeing how it could be when we get rid of this institutional evil of government.
Yeah. So what do you think it would be the way to reduce the force of the government, for your future plans if it comes to become a nominee and then candidate and then president one day? And what would be like, what are the measures you think would be long-term solutions for this?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned it, but every time I have to introduce myself as a presidential candidate, I throw up in my mouth a little bit, because you have to be some kind of psychopath, right, to want to be president of the United States. So the premise of my platform, of the whole campaign, is that I'm not even going to put on the ring of power. I'm going to throw it directly into the fire. And that means I'm resigning on day one. The federal government is declared of no authority. The Constitution is null and void. All federal laws stop being enforced on day one. And I resign the presidency to become custodian of the federal government, as in the bankruptcy agent, taking it through a peaceful, orderly, responsible process that leaves us with 50 independent states and up to 562 sovereign native nations. And as we liquidate the corporation of the federal government, we pay back the American people as directly as possible. So we are getting our stuff back, our freedom, our potential, and our birthright that's been stolen from us. And that includes taking back so much of the land in the Western states that the federal government claims to own. And so I see this as the first step in localization. And that's getting governments down to the community level, taking them apart one little bureaucratic layer at a time. And it's actually embarrassing how moderate this platform is. There are 22 million people at the state, local, state, and federal level working for government in the United States. 22 million. The federal government is only 3 million. And in my plan, a lot of them will get rehired at the state and local level as we localize the federal government. So I'm talking about cutting less than 1 in 7 government jobs. That's kind of embarrassing, right? That it's that small a step. But to say we're going to take the government apart from the top down, this is the critical transition. And this is why this is a radical platform in the best sense of the word, striking at the root. Like Henry David Thoreau, for every 1,000 striking at the branches of evil, there is one striking at the root. And to me, that's what this platform really is all about, striking the root that is centralized authoritative government. We get rid of the federal government. It might take a decade to get to the point where states feel like they're stable enough, I should say people in each state, and they decide that they want to break away, or people separate from the states just want to break away from the beginning. But I think what you're going to see is a continuation of localization, that you're going to see states racing to dissolve down to the county level. And then once you get government down to the county level, libertarians, we're just the jerks in the corner trying to be right about everything. You know, government is already so insignificant in our lives that it's fluid, right? And it becomes community based. If you get government down to the county level, you could break off in your neighborhood, in your community, and say, you know what, our area, we want to be sovereign too. We're going to create our own community. You could on your own land, you could either be actually sovereign or very effectively sovereign with very little effort. Because getting government down to the community level, whether you call it government or not at that point, I don't care. But is it voluntary? Is it ethical? And the answer is yes, because a community is something that you choose to be a part of. You can choose to leave at any time. You can opt out, and at that point in which you can say, you know what, I'm sovereign on my own land. I want to be free. Just leave me alone. Or I only want peaceful relationships with other people, no relationships with violent authority anymore. When you have that right respected, yeah, we did it. We solved the problem of coercive, violent authority in government. And we're going to do that all over the world. That's the future for freedom. That's the future of humanity. It's our generation, the internet people coming into power. We're going to redraw all the lines on the map, however we feel like it, to meet our needs based on our values. We don't have to do it that way just because it's always been done that way. This is our chance. And in the United States, I think of this as the difference between Republicans and Democrats is like driving off the edge of a cliff at 70 miles an hour or 80 miles an hour. I don't know which one is which, and I don't really care. But it's time for us to stand up and put our hand on the steering wheel and say, nope, we're going to turn it to the side. We're going to go in a whole new direction. We don't have to keep doing it this way. So I'm really excited. I think this is an incredible time to be alive. I'm running for the Libertarian Party nomination for president. And I think, tell me, is there anybody outside of the United States who would rather the U.S. federal government not exist?
Oh, I don't know.
Ah,
I'm okay. I'm okay with the government to exist, but I think it is a better idea to have smaller governments or no governments. I was always fascinated. Years ago, I would mention this all the time, the Venus Project. You might have heard, yeah.
I'm familiar.
And I was like, I want to go live in this
Jack
place.
Fresco.
Yeah. and some people was like, oh, that is just an utopia. And I was like, no, I actually believe humans. I'm a humanist in that way. I know we can be good and you can be bad with reason and in civil conversations. We can find the middle ground and be morals without bigger rules, overpower of gods or governments. I think we have got that advantage after so many years of evolution, of social evolution. Like we have reached that point. I always like to point a lot of people like Yaron Brook that talks about individualism and objectivism, and Ayn Rand and other free thinkers that talk about this. Sam Harris talk a lot about objective moral, and I really believe we can all get into that middle ground and be ethical, like you said, without having governments to tell us what is good, what is right or wrong, or to have God telling like don't kill. Like, no, we know that ultimately it is bad, and we can objectively say it's immoral to kill or to steal. Those two principles should be the basis, and we do not need much more than that. So I love your book. People go check the book, Freedom, on freedomonline.com. How was the building the book? Because I know you wrote it when you were in prison. How was that? Was that like just super easy, just popped out like because you had nothing else to do, or you had to concentrate on that?
Well, it's a fun story. I'll keep it quick because I got to go here in just a minute. But it was, people sent me all the best libertarian manifestos, and I decided to create the synthesis of all of their strengths and none of their weaknesses, and make one book that was the ultimate red pill that people would want to share, that can wake people up as effectively as possible. And so I got it down to 100 pages in short sections, and it covers everything you need to know. And it's, I can convert someone or get someone to agree with libertarian ethics and the premise of voluntarism. It takes me 2 minutes, and people go, oh yeah, okay, I get that. But if they don't really internalize it as a worldview that they can hold on to, they let it go. And you have to take the time to at least read a 100-page book or get the free audio book and get it as a sort of comprehensive ethical, political, social worldview that will keep out all the bad thoughts of statism, all the temptations of violence that lead you back to that policy. So anyway, Fanny, you wanted to close out and share a smoke. I'm in California,
let's
so
do it.
but you're in Canada, and it's like totally legal for you. At least I'm committing civil disobedience here, sort of breaking federal law. So in that spirit.
Yeah, but we need to register because nobody would believe that I smoked with Adam Kokesh. So we need to record it.
Oh, they'll believe you.
So
it is a surprisingly common occurrence, actually.
yeah, Adam,
Cannabis
I
can bring
would say
people
that we
together.
still need to have another conversation, another meeting, because I had a list of things here that we did not even get close of people fears, and it's all about like I believe the idea of freedom and government they can totally get from your book because it's 3 hours of great listening. Um, and of course,
Thanks.
you point a lot of gun control and the property and privacy rights and other things, the taxation as a theft. And I really recommend people to go check, even go a little bit on marriage rights. But it would be really good if you can go through those topics like gun control, abortion, and the taxation itself and marriage and LGBTQ rights stuff for people that still feel the fear that they need a bigger government to take care of those issues.
Yeah.
In practice, we can say that would not change anything you becoming president, but for people that fear, they still gonna have a government to rely all the time. So there is no need to fear that much. No, is that the ending conclusion?
That's definitely part of it. I think you're actually overplaying the fear. Most people, it's very easy to show them, compared to localizing government, you have more to fear from what we're experiencing today. And to say we're capable of better as a species than the current government paradigm, that's really hard to argue with. So in a sense, people have a natural fear of the unknown, a natural fear of change. But it's very easy for them to shift that perspective from I'm here, I'm comfortable, I don't want to change. What are you trying to change? Instead, they go, okay, I'm a sick patient. I need to go see a doctor. And I'm not going to be afraid. Like, yes, I understand. I'm going to have to put some effort into getting healthy. I'm going to have to put some effort into addressing this issue, whatever it is. I'm going to have to go and listen to a doctor and learn what's going on. And I might have to take some unpleasant medicine, but this is the process of getting healthy. I might be afraid of needles and go, oh, I got to get an injection. Oh, I'm scared. But you get the freaking injection once you realize like that's what it is. Because we just a little, inoculation against coercive violence, and boom, government that's the cure. Government is the
You totally
disease.
nailed it.
And as soon as a critical mass of society goes through that shift, nah, no big deal.
No,
We're gonna take care of this.
I think you totally nailed because I have talked to some people just recently about this, about like the principles that in medicine we have, or like first to always do the best, and second to avoid the bad doing. So if anything that can harm, you should avoid. But
Correct.
we understand that in
The
medicine we
Hippocratic
still
Oath.
have the harm. Doesn't matter what. Like even when you prevent the disease with a vaccine, you have the needle, so you were just trying to minimize it, and that is, I
Mm,
think, is the idea of you using the government to try to reduce the harm and the damage, so it's
yeah.
it's pretty, and also to know to how to measure how much we go, like how far we should go on protecting, because one of the thoughts I have, for example, in Brazil, that is very relatable to Brazil, is corporativism. That is like it's a way to protect someone, but in fact just harms the small companies and the small entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's not good. In the end,
Well,
it's not good. And
hey,
thank you
Fanny,
very much.
let's do this again after we
Let's
win the
do it.
nomination, and
Yes,
then we can talk about international policy as the nominee of the Libertarian Party. And I will say, so for the next 4 months, I'm basically just zigzagging back and forth across the country, going to Libertarian Party state conventions. If there's anybody, of course, you can't donate if you're not a U.S. citizen, and you can't participate if you're not in the United States. But anybody who's watching this, if you want to help us out, if you're in the United States, if you can be a delegate to the national convention to be vote for me there for the nomination, it's surprisingly easy to get involved. And I know you'll put the links in and everything, but
I will.
my email specifically, adam@thefreedomline.com, if you want to email me to get involved. I'd love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, people go follow and support Adam and spread the message of freedom. Thank you very
Peace and
much.
love, y'all.
Thank you.